Hello everyone and welcome to 2017 and to Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. I'm grateful we made it into the new year. Some couldn't, some due to conflict or disease, but we're here now and we're grateful. This week we review major events in 2016. I'd like us to remember a brewing diplomatic spat between the United States and Russia. On Thursday, President Barack Obama expelled 35 Russian diplomats from the United States, referring to them as intelligence operatives, acting in a manner inconsistent with their diplomatic status. They were given 72 hours to leave U.S. soil. 2 Russian compounds are also closed in New York and in Maryland. The measures were introduced in response to the Russian government's aggressive harassment of U.S. officials and cyber operations aimed at the U.S. election. President Barack Obama later said in a document that Americans should be alarmed by Russia's actions, as data theft and disclosure activities could only have been directed by the highest levels of the Russian government. He also said U.S. diplomats have experienced an unacceptable level of harassment in Moscow by Russian security services and police over the last year. Now, the U.S. has also sanctioned 9 Russian entities, including the GRU, the Russian Military Intelligence, and the FSB, the Federal Security Service. President Obama has promised more sanctions against Russia later. While this move is the most unprecedented by any U.S. president, it's not certain whether President-elect Donald Trump, who has repeatedly praised the Russian President Vladimir Putin and nominated people as friendly towards Moscow to see administration posts, would seek to roll back the measures once he takes office on January 20th. The Russian government says the sanctions will not go unanswered. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has denied any charges of Russia meddling in the November election, but says Russia will not be retaliating the U.S. action. The Russian ambassador to the United Nations, however, Vitaly Churkin, told reporters at the UN that shutting down the Russian compounds in Upper Brookville on Long Island in New York and in the one Centerville, Maryland, as scandalous. Professor Akin Oyebode of the Department of International Law and Jurisprudence at the University of Lagos joins me now for the analysis of U.S.-Russia relations and other major events in 2016. Professor Akin Oyebode, thank you so much for joining us on Diplomatic Channel, our first edition this year. So it's great to have you here on the show.
It's always a pleasure.
Now, before the year ended, U.S. President Barack Obama announced the expulsion of 35 Russian diplomats, all related to a cyber attack that he believed that the Russian government, the Russian authorities, because he mentioned high-profile people, Russian authorities probably, did influence in the U.S. elections in November. What do you make of what is going on? What do you make of President Barack Obama's claims?
Well, I believe it's political chess on a very high pedestal. Russia used to be known as the Soviet Union, as the counterpoise to Uncle Sam. Now, Russia has been diminished in size, and people will say even political nuisance, especially when you remember what Russia did in the Ukraine, in Georgia, and also in the Caucasus. That's the takeover of
Crimea.
The Crimean part of the Ukraine. So this is an attempt, in my view, by Russia to go for broke in terms of who becomes the next president of the United States. I know Donald Trump says the jury is still out on whether there was hacking by the Russians, but we have been informed by 18 intelligence outfits of the United States of America that it was the handiwork of the Russians. Now, Putin denies it, but again, Obama would have looked completely washed up if he did not take the action he did. Some people have said that the action was too little and too late. But what is interesting about the whole thing was the way Putin refused to play the tick-for-tack approach in diplomacy. In Nigeria, we normally call it, you chaka me, I'll double you. But in this instance, Putin did not play ball.
This point you have made raises 2 questions in my mind. First of all, President-elect Donald Trump, who had initially said before the elections that he suspects the elections will be rigged. And, at the end of the day, it probably, maybe, Russia's intervention in the elections and the cyber attack saga may have also led to Donald Trump winning the elections. We don't know. But then also, do you possibly think that the United States US elections could have been influenced from outside?
Well, if you have to believe the Americans, the Russians have the technology and the know-how to interfere with the process by bugging the phones and hacking the websites of the Democratic Committee and the chief organizer of the Clinton team by ensuring that certain information was leaked on WikiLeaks to the detriment of Hillary Clinton at a decisive moment, and which Trump played on by saying that Mrs. Clinton was a criminal who belonged in jail and that she had no character. In fact, it would seem to be a conspiracy between Putin and Mr. Trump to do in Hillary Clinton. And saying that the electoral process in America was suspect before the event, that the only reason why, or the only situation which will enable him accept the result is if he won. For me, that was a cheap blackmail on the Americans, because Donald Trump is notoriously inconsistent. He will say or do anything that will get him extra votes.
And I know we've asked this question before, what sort of president Donald Trump will make? But I think it's becoming a bit clearer now, you know, what sort of person he is. He will damn the consequences and go ahead, and he has no respect for U.S. treaties and, you know, diplomacy and so on, calling up the Taiwanese president to China's own surprise and anger, and then, you know, siding with people like the Russian President Vladimir Putin and so on, to the detriment of U.S.-owned policies against Russia and so on. Looking forward, as we gradually inch towards his becoming president of the United States, what sort of president do you think he will make?
Well, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. And if you look at the people he had proposed for his cabinet, millionaires, whites, I think only Ben Carson is the sole black face and the whole motley crowd. I think we're going to have a right-wing, conservative, all-American type cabinet. So, and Donald Trump, as a businessman, will run into trouble with his empire, his real estate empire, his golf courses and hotels and what have you. He's still not telling us whether he's going to have a blind trust, whether his children or his wife will be manning the business sector. But the Americans, for the first time in their history, they are confronting a president that will become so controversial. Okay, and he's not even assured of full Republican support in Congress.
And since we're already entering into 2017 and we're already here anyway, terrorism was a big issue in 2016. We saw terror attacks springing up in places that had not ever experienced terrorism before. The attacks in Belgium, the ones in Germany, especially soon after the migrant crisis and so on. Do you think that the world has paid enough attention to fighting terror?
Well, let's start off with what happened in France, because that was a shocker. And France has now been like a soft underbelly of the NATO countries. And France sharing a neighbor with Belgium. Many of the terrorists who flee to find succor in Belgium. But the one that I think shocked everybody was that of Germany. Germany is the locomotive of Europe. And you know, Angela Merkel opened the doors to the immigrants, to the refugees, because maybe she was suffering from the subconscious of what the Germans did in the Second World War. And she also coming from old East Germany. So she wanted to do some recompense for the German attitude previously. But it seems it has become an albatross around her neck. In France, the National Front, Marine Le Pen, they are coming strong, but I'm not sure France will elect a National Front government. But the candidate of the right, who is being touted in the media as a very formidable candidate, might actually take control. But in terms of terrorism, I think the blame game has been indulged in by Europe and America. But terrorism is not just Euro-American. We also have on the African continent, much close to you and I, Boko Haram
Yeah, we're going to
has become an important player in terms of terrorism.
and probably maybe more attention on Boko Haram, because we didn't see much of international rallying, you know, towards Nigeria, towards fighting Boko Haram. It seemed like much of 2016 we were on our own.
Well, we were on our own, and thank goodness, towards the end of 2016, we had the collapse of Ground Zero, or Camp Zero, and then the announcement that we've broken the back of Boko Haram. Although we've had that before, a sense of deja vu. How many times are you going to say you break the backs of the Boko Haram and they will just bounce back? Al-Shekau, the man who has maybe 9 lives, will still come up with another video saying that, look, I'm still around and I'm going to give you a lot of trouble in future. So quite sincerely, maybe it's precipitate to rejoice that we have actually finished Boko Haram.
Well, I'd like to talk a bit more about Africa, and there were some presidents who were supposed to have, you know, a number of elections took place this year, or were supposed to have also taken place this year. Let's say Ghana, and then there was Gambia, and then there was the DRC, where President Joseph Kabila was supposed to have conducted elections but did not, and then changed the constitution, or is hoping to change the constitution so that he can stay till April 2018. With all of these that's been going on, do you really think that Africa moved forward democratically and politically in 2016?
Well, you remind me of what my late friend Claude Akin said in 1992. Is Africa democratizing? That was the question he posed then. Well, the understanding of democracy in Africa does not seem to tally with the Western approach, because we lack the prerequisites, the infrastructure for democracy. There's a lot of poverty in Africa. There's a lot of starvation and alienation. So we are not a Western liberal democracy, despite speaking French or English or what have you. If you look at Burundi, in Bujumbura, the president has killed so many of his citizens because he does not want to go. DRC, within the last 2 weeks, killed more than 40 nationals of the Congo. And then in Gambia, the smallest state in West Africa, we had an election on the 1st of December, and everybody said, oh, fantastic. Jammeh said, yes, he accepts. But lo and behold, like the chameleon that he is, he turned around to disown the results and said he was going to go to court to oust the Electoral Commission and to buy time, so to speak. So there's a problem here. What's political pundits call seat-tightism, that it's not in the DNA of African leaders.
I'd also like us to review President Muhammadu Buhari's and leading Nigeria's performance on the international scene in 2016. The president made a lot of trips. Do you think there was a lot of benefits coming out of those trips that he made and those meetings that he had?
Well, he had tremendous dividends from his trip to China. China is now the leading country aiding Nigeria's recovery program because of the credits that the Chinese offered Nigeria. When I was in China, the Chinese were saying that they are the largest country in Asia and Nigeria is the largest country in Africa, that there should be synergy between both countries. So even as I speak, 40 of our students in UNILAG are in China. Oh. We have a degree program in Chinese studies, 2 years in UNILAG, 2 years in China. Oh. And at the end of the program, the students, the graduates can opt for whichever degree they want, either that of Lagos or that of the Chinese university. So there is a lot of interaction. Look at what the Chinese have done in Nigeria, the Lagos Ikorodu road, right to Ikorodu, they've transformed the landscape. And you can see what they are doing at the airports in Abuja and in Lagos. The Chinese have come to Nigeria.
Professor Akin Oyebode, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for joining us on Diplomatic Channel.
You're welcome, Amara.
Still ahead on Diplomatic Channel, other major diplomatic issues in the year 2016. Just stay with us.